Okay, we're going to discuss this week's Parsha, Parshas Naso, which has a distinction of being the longest Parsha in the Torah based on Psukim. I can't tell you exactly off the top of my head how many it has, but it's by far one of the longest ones, and it's also topically has a lot of interesting things. So, to the extent we can or are able to speak about all of the aspects of the parsha in any detail, I think really is not realistic. There's a lot of them, and I think a lot of information is not going to make things necessarily any clearer. So we're going to go thematically through the parsha, highlighting some ideas, some more, some less, and then after it's all over, if there's still anything worth discussing, we'll continue. Bamidbar, we discussed last time, Bamidbar is the first book of the book of Bamidbar. In English, Bamidbar means numbers because it's a counting of the Jewish people. We went through the different ideas of why the Jews were counted and what counting means. But the last episode in Parshas Bamidbar discusses the responsibility of the family of Kehas, or Kehat in English, of the family of Levi. What was their responsibility? Their responsibility was to carry the Aron HaKodesh, the Holy Ark, the Ark of the Covenant, where the Luchot were kept, and also the vessels, the special vessels of the Mishkan, the menorah, the Lechem Haponim, and the small Mizbeach. The large Mizbeach was constructed as the Jews went along. In the beginning of this week's parsha, we continue from there, and it discusses the responsibility of the family of Gershon, also from the house of Levi, followed by Merari. The Gershonites, the family of Gershon, carry the tapestries and the coverings of the Mishkan, and everything that came with it, the hooks and so on and so forth. And the family of Merari carried with them, they carried the beams. They carried the beams and everything that came together with it, the sockets and so on and so forth. Then it counts up to specifically who they are. Following that in the parsha, again, I'm giving you a fast review, then I'm going to go back and discuss this separately, so you have sort of the trajectory of the story. Following that, you have the commandment that whoever is impure should leave the camp of Machne Yisrael. Now, what this means is, though, we already discussed it in previous parsha, that if a man or a woman was a tzarua, had leprosy is not exactly the term. Tzeras, we didn't have a chance to discuss, we didn't have a class, but tzeras is an approximation of leprosy. Leprosy is a modern day sickness. Tzeras was a sickness that existed during the time of Beis Hamikdash, and we're told that it was really spiritual in nature. In other words, it wasn't bacterial, it wasn't viral, it was just something that came as a punishment for the sin, among other things, of being proud and the sin of Lashon Hara. Therefore, Tzerat is not really connected. If somebody now has leprosy, there's a leprous colony, but we don't have laws for them in the Torah. They had to go outside the third camp where the Jews were. Now, you had the first camp is where the Beit HaMikdash was, the Mishkan rather, then you had the Levites were around that, and then the Jews were around that, and the Tzarua, or the Zav is a man or woman that had an emission from the body, would have to go there as well. Following that, it seems to be a little bit sort of disconnected, exactly all of these different ideas, but there's obviously a connection between them. The next episode is that if a person stole, or he swore and he didn't pay back, or in other words, something involving money, for example, he takes a collateral, on a loan, and then he said, I don't know, I never got any collateral, I lost it, it was stolen, it was broken, so on and so forth, so on and so forth. So if he claims he doesn't have it, and he swears, and then it turns out that he lied. So according to the Torah, the person himself acknowledged that, right, I'm sorry, I lied, he has to pay back the principal plus 20% penalty. On top of that, and then he also had to bring a mishkan. Now, bring a carbon sacrifice. If a person, died, the person died. So who would get, the person died in between, admitting to whatever he owed and the paying back. So who gets the money? So according to Jewish law, the next of kin get the money. Whoever is next in the line of succession gets the money. The children, the son, grandson, so on, so on, so on. What if a person has no next of kin? Or if a person is a person is a convert. According to Jewish law, a convert doesn't have halachic parents or children unless he married, and then he married a Jewish woman, and then he had a son or a daughter. But prior to that, there's no halachic sort of connection between the ger and any of the other people in his life before that. So who does it go to? It goes to the kohen. It goes to the kohen. So then, this is really what it discusses. That he asked once it gets back to the kohen. There's also, he has to also give a vow, an oath, or rather, he has to admit his sin, admit his mistake. Then, so that is in the third aliyah. The fourth aliyah is really the longest and really the most, not the most interesting, but it's a really, really fascinating concept, the idea of the unfaithful wife, the ish sota. And that if a husband suspected a wife of infidelity, and there's a whole tractate, there's a whole book in the Talmud that discusses the various nuances. He suspected her, then he warned her with one witness, two witnesses, so on and so forth. There's a lot of details, but the bottom line is he warned her, and then it was witnessed that she secluded herself with this specific person against whom she was warned not to seclude herself with, and then the husband calls her out on it, and she denies any fault. Then they go to the Beis Hamikdash, and there's a whole procedure of it. There's a whole procedure. What happens in the Beis Hamikdash? It's not really described here in great length, but it says that he's put in, and there's a certain ceremony that she has to undergo, all in order for her to get her to admit that she was at fault. Now, it's interesting as a side point. It says that all of these things work, and it was only relevant if the husband himself was a straight-up guy. In other words, if he was busy, as they say in English, on the side, right? He was up to no good, and he was suspecting her. None of this would work. It has to be that she was suspected of doing something wrong and of being unfaithful, and this is how the procedure went. And then it said that he took a Megillah, he wrote a scroll, and he wrote the name of God on the scroll, and there was a vessel with water, and it was this scroll was immersed in this water, and then she was she still persisted in denying her fault. She was forced to drink it, and if she was guilty, it said that her the waters went through her and proved her to be guilty. The lower limbs exploded and so on. And it says at the same time, the person she was unfaithful with, it also happened. In other words, whatever happened to her happened to him, and she was faithful. In other words, if she was like a false warning, it was a false alarm, as it were. In other words, the husband was overly zealous. And so, on the contrary, she proceeded to live with blessings, and on the contrary, she was granted children, and so on and so on. So again, there's a tremendous amount of meaning, and just on this thing alone can have probably not more than one class, but you only have one class on the whole parsha. Then after that is the episode of the Nazir, the Nazarite, who, as our sages say, witnessing what the Isha Sota, the unfaithful wife, did because of drinking wine. Right? Our sages say usually, when two people get together for purposes like this, it's going to be some alcohol involved, right? So to get the mood going and to set things right. So they had some wine, and everybody got into the frame of mind, and therefore the Nazir, the Nazarite, witnessing what wine can do, says, "I no more wine." right? There's those of us, take a short diversion into American history, where you had the temperance movement, where you had a whole movement led by women. Interesting enough, in our case, the men are looking at the women not to drink wine, but in American history, you had a whole movement of women that said that our husbands get paid and they go to the bar and they lose all the money, and we can't live like this anymore. It's destroying the family, destroying the house, so on and so on. And the reason why you had the prohibition in America is because you had a whole movement of women, very powerful, by the way, who influenced. Yeah, the wife of the president at the time, she was one of the people involved in the temperance movement, by the way. If you wondered how does that happen in America, she passed a law against drinking alcohol because you had friends in high places. And anyway, he takes a vow not to drink wine and not to cut his hair and not to be contaminated by impurity for all the right purposes. For all the right purposes. And it says after that, he also goes through the ceremony after 30 days. He cuts his hair, and the hair is put under the mizbeach for the fire that cooked the nut, and he brings two doves as a sacrifice, and it's done. So that's the sort of Nazir. Again, there's a whole book at the Talmud specifically describing the idea of the Nazir. Okay, so it gives you an idea how much information is there. And then finally, concluding this piece is the words everybody knows from Fiddler on the Roof. May God protect you and keep you, right? I'm not going to sing it, but you know what I'm speaking about. Yivarach Hashem v'yishmerecha, the Birkas Kohen, the priestly blessing. Yivarach Hashem v'yishmerecha, may God bless you and keep you. Yoyer Hashem panav v'lecha v'cholach, may God shine His face on you and grant you chen. Chen is grace. Yoyer Hashem panav v'lecha v'yesem v'chashol, may God shine His face on you and place peace upon you. So that comes at the conclusion of that. That is the priestly blessing. Okay? And following that is a very, 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 very long stretch describing the bringing of the 12 tribes, what each one brought. So there again, and even though it seems very repetitive, there's a tremendous amount of meaning within each one of the sacrifices. There's a medrash that explains how even though they brought the same things, seemingly, the same items are listed over and over and over again, they meant different things for them than it meant for the previous tribes. So how could that be? They all brought exactly the same thing, right? And this is in and of itself an amazing, by the way, an amazing lesson that that within Judaism you have this idea of, on the one hand, you have what seems to be a uniformity. Everybody's doing the same thing. Everybody's praying the same thing. Everybody's doing the mitzvot the same thing, and so on. You could say, well, why? How interesting is that? Why does God need how many people? 1 million, 2 million people, or how many observant people have to do exactly the same thing every single day? That doesn't get interesting. You could assume He has angels for that, right? It will be a lot more interesting if everybody did something differently every single day. But the point there is that within the performance of each Jew is him or her. Because we all have our unique and specific energy that we imbue this mitzvah with. There's our personality. There's our inner self that we imbue into this mitzvah, or the prayer that is specifically ours. So even though technically you can say, well, it's the same. It's not the same. Just like the 12 offerings, the gifts of the 12 tribes was identical in the quantity, in the substance, but definitely not identical in the inner, deeper message. So that there you have, in short, the entire sort of, as we call the Parsha in a nutshell. Now we're going to rewind back. By the way, I guess for next time, it would help if you want to have like a physical chumash to go along, so we can discuss some of the things specific. Okay, so first off, let's begin with the following. The end of last week's parsha we mentioned was the responsibility of the family of Kehat. And what was their responsibility? The responsibility was to carry the Aron HaKodesh through the desert, followed by Gershon, followed by Merari. So here is a couple of questions worth asking. The obvious question, for those that are a little bit familiar with with the order of the birth of the sons of Levi is that Kehat was not the oldest. Gershon was the oldest. Okay, Gershon was the oldest. So, but here you have Kehat being the first one mentioned, and where is he mentioned? He's mentioned at the end of the previous parsha, which is weird because you would assume, why would you cut that like right there? You know, either have Gershon and Merari at the end of Bamidbar, or you have Kehat at the beginning of Naso. So why cut it in two? Also, Naso means to lift up. It's an interesting expression. It's an interesting expression that's used in order to denote the idea of counting. Also, an interesting question for those of you that might have noticed. I don't know if it gets over hard necessarily, but Midbar was said in the second month of the second year, in the year 2449 of the creation of the world. Then from there we're going into the the Mishkan is already made and different responsibilities. Then we have all of the seemingly random episodes of you can't steal and the impure should leave the camp, so on and so forth. And then you have the Ishtaita, and then it goes back to a month before the beginning, which means when was the Mishkan dedicated? In the month of Nisan, in the year 2449, a month before the beginning of the book of Bamidbar. So we're kind of going back and forth. We're going a month back. Then we're going through all of these separate. So in other words, it's really, there's a lot of questions here, just right off the bat, that make it a little bit hard to put it together. So it's an interesting idea that I want to share with you, that, and I mentioned it last time to those that were here, the reason why the Midbar was given in the desert, the Torah was given in the desert. Really, the purpose of the Jew is to transform the desert. The desert being not just a physical place with cactuses and roadrunners and whatever, right? But it also symbolizes a wasteland, a desolate place, a desolate place. What helps us transform this desolate inner space into something that's a garden, that's alive? Torah. Torah is the Mayim Chaim, the waters that give life. The waters that give life. But what is the purpose of the Torah? Is the purpose of the Torah for the Jew who's in the desert, or is the purpose of the Torah for the Jew who goes out into the world? And at this point, we have the division between Bamidbar and Naso. Naso means to lift up, it means to count, but it also means, Naso means to lift up. Lift up the heads of the Jewish people. The heads not only lift them up in order to count them, but lift them up also. What gives the Jew the ability of lifting his head above the water, lifting his head above the sand, and above the desolation, and above the negativity of this world. But not only lifting him up, it also gives him the ability of moving forward into the world. So in that regard, you have first and foremost the first stages of Torah. Kehat. So why does Kehat go before Gershon? So here you have two reasons. One reason Medrash offers is because Moshe and Aaron came from Kehat. So when the leader of the Jewish people comes from your tribe, you get a little protection. You get bumped at the beginning of the line, right? You get mentioned first. Also because the carrying of the Torah was more important. Carrying of the Torah, of all of the things. So obviously you're going to list that thing which is more important. But also another idea here, is that with that said, chronologically, Gershon is first, then Kehat, and then Merari. And the idea there being is just like a person who wants to build a house. What is the first thing that you do before you build a house?
Buy the land.
You get permits. So the first thing you do before you buy the house, and you already have the land, is you got to clear it out. You got to clear it out. You can't build a house on top of a swamp. because no matter how nice it is, it's going to sink. So the first thing you got to do is you got to clear house. And that corresponds to the idea of gershon. The garesh means to evict, throw out, right? Gerushin is divorce. You got to divorce yourself from the negative of the material world, the inner tavot, the inner desires, that which is negative. That has got to go first. Then you move in the furniture. Then you have kehat. Then you have merari. What's merari? Merari means bitterness. What does bitterness mean? Bitterness is not sadness, as we understand it. Bitterness means it's a realization of what you have and what you can be. It's not a sense of depression. It's not a sense of worthlessness. Because when a person feels worthless, nothing happens. That's why it's associated with the Yetzer Hara, right? A person loses hope. He doesn't lose hope that now he lost, but tomorrow he's going to win. He lost hope, Shai. And what happens after hopelessness? Nothing happens. That's what happens. That's how we know it doesn't come from the nefesh elokit, the godly side of the person. Because if it came from the godly side, then it would bring us to something else. And in order to get to something else, sometimes you have to acknowledge where you are is not where you need to be. Right? Like the story mentioned of the Alter Rebbe, that he had a Talmud, he had a student who had a son. And the Alter Rebbe lived at the beginning of the 19th century. He had a son who liked fast things. Now it's fast cars, then it was fast horses. It wasn't really an occupation, and it wasn't really a pastime for a nice Jewish boy in Russia in the 19th century, right? Jews didn't get on fast horses, right? They got on a wagon, whatever, if you had to. But he liked to get around, he liked to be out. So this father didn't know how to influence him. He figured, okay, I'm going to bring the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe is going to set him straight. He's going to speak some common sense into the boy. So they speak on, the Alter Rebbe said, come, sit. Tell me about yourself. What are you doing? So he tells him. He says, "Oh, your father tells me you like fast horses." Now the son's saying, "Oh, I knew it's coming." Now the rabbi is going to get under my skin. He's gonna tell me how to live my life. Why am I here? He says, "Yeah, Rabbi, you're right. Horses. And he's waiting for the Alter Rebbe. How could you? What kind of a thing is this for a Jewish boy? Oh, okay, I hear it. And why do you like fast horses? Because they're fast and they're horses. They go. Says, that's good. I get it. I understand that. But what happens if you go fast on a horse and it swerves off the way? What happens? What happens? It goes far away. And at this point, the boy began to, and the Alter Rebbe put his head down, and the boy understood he understood what the message was. But he also understood that just as fast as you can get off the way, the horse just as quickly is able to bring you back. So Merirus is really about, Merira means that once a person has, you have Torah, but you also have to have a sense of a yearning, a sense of that there's more that I can aspire to. It says that one of the most delectable things is taking something bitter and eating it together with something sweet. The combination of two opposites, sweetness and sourness, they're able to, they work well together, and because they both supplement each other. So when the bitterness, the merirus, is based off the sweetness or the positivity of wanting to be a better Jew, better person, then it works well. Otherwise, it cancels each other out. So therefore, again, coming back, and I don't want to kind of belabor this point too much, you have two separate ideas. One, the reason why Kehat and it belongs at the end of last week's Parsha is for the reason number one, is that it belongs to the episode of the Jews being counted in the desert, Midbar, right? Naso is more about the Jews moving. They're finally on the 20th of year moving through the desert. They're two separate episodes. One empowers the other, but they're separate episodes. Kehat is good, but what's the main thing? What's the main function for a Jew? Gershon. Gershon is actually moving, doing. As our sages say, Hamaiseh hu hayikar. The action is the main thing. Of the two, whether a person thinking and thinking and thinking, or just, do. Less perfect, more perfect. The main thing is the deed. The main thing is the action. You did, Baruch Hashem, you're able to do more. You're able to move on from there. So that is, in short, I guess, at least some of the ideas in the beginning of the parsha. Then it moves on to the idea of moving outside of the camp. Now, one of the reasons it mentions this here, even though we already had it before, the idea of purity, the idea of impurity, is because the Jewish people, the Israelites, were beginning to feel a little bit neglected, as it were. Which means that God said, so first you have the main area is where the Mishkan is fine, the Moshe Rabbeinu is. And then you have the area around that where the Levim are, okay? And that's important. What about the area of the regular Jews? Is that important? Maybe God loves only those that serve him. Maybe he only loves the priests. Maybe he only loves the Levites, the people that sing and doesn't really think all that much about the rest of it. Just there, they kind of slip along. He says no. Because when it applies to purity, the ideas of purity apply to the entire Jewish people. The idea of being connected to God, the idea of purity, Kedusha, that's something that applies to all of the three camps, not only those that are Kohanim, only those that are Levim. Okay, so that is that part. So, and the third part, which we also discussed on, the idea of theft, even though the idea of theft was already described, here it mentions again the idea of a person swearing, and also having to pay the 20% extra. The idea of having to pay the 20% extra. So in this regard, you also have some interesting ideas worth noting, which is the following. It just says, why is this chronologically, according to Rashi and according to the Medrash, why is the episode of theft immediately before the laws and the story of the unfaithful wife? And it says the following. Because within this very episode that we just discussed, among other things, it also says that there's certain gifts that belong to the Kahanim. You have to give them mice, you have to give them a tenth. And other things, and Bikurim, it also mentions there that Bikurim is that unlike all of the other gifts that the Kohen gets, Bikurim, first fruit, had to be brought to the Kohen. The others, Kohen has to go get himself. Right? He has to go collecting. He had his farmers, and he went and he had to collect from each one what, the specific gifts. Bikurim, the Jews had to bring to God. The firstborn, they had to bring to God. So here, there's a very interesting Medrash. Rashi brings it up. It says that why these two things placed together, and it explains. And by the example of a story. There was a person that had a large field. And he would collect 1,000 kur. Kur is a dry measurement of wheat. K-U-R, or chaf operation. And he would give it 100 of it, 10% to the Kohen. So it's a tremendous amount. A kur is, I don't remember exactly the measurement, it's a pretty large measurement. And he would give 10% of that to the Kohen. So he died, as an inheritance, he gave this field to his son. And he said, look, you have to continue. Now the son, when it came time for the harvest, and he gathered it in, he said, 100 kur is a lot. 100 kur is a lot. I mean, it's a tremendous amount of wheat just to give away. So, what's the worst that can happen? 90 is nice. 90 kur is very nice. So he gave 90 kur. The year after, the field yielded 900 kur. 10% of his previous year's donation. So he said, oh, 900 kur, so I have to give 80. So he kept on lowering the bar on how much he would give to the kohen. Until in 10 years, his whole produce yielded 100 kur. So his relatives made fun of him. He says, before you were God and you gave from your field to a kohen. Now you're the kohen and God is the owner. So in other words, that which you used to give to the kohen is now exactly what you're left with. Because you kept on making all these calculations and to give less and less and less and less. But Rashi goes a step further. He says, oh, God gave him a field and he's meant to give a portion of the produce to the kohen. You're going to be cheap with giving produce to the kohen. You're going to sell your field. Once you sell your field, you're going to sell your house. Once you're going to sell your house, you're going to have to lead your wife to the kohen because she's going to be unfaithful to you. So there's sort of a order and a consequence that goes one to the other. And while we're still on the subject, it's an interesting aside. There's a story in the Gemara about Rabbi Yochanan. We know Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish were. It's a very interesting story. I'm not going to discuss those specific instances. Rabbi Yochanan was once walking, and he saw a child going from cheder, from yeshiva, and he tells him, "Sokli psukcha," which in Hebrew means, "Tell me something." Right. So the sages would have this interesting idea. They would see a boy going home from school, and they would say, "Just tell me randomly, just what you learned today." Now, it wasn't just in order to test them. They also used that as a way of understanding, as like a way of getting a message from God. Right? Those of you familiar with the story of Purim, there's a medrash about how Mordechai and Haman were walking. They saw a Jewish boy, and they asked him, "What did you say?" And they said, "Al tirim pachapisim, don't be afraid from things that scare you." And from the Mishaot, and from the screaming, they'll come to you. Eitz of a super, they planned against you, and then they will, and it was nullified, and so on. That part that we say after davening was based on the dialogue between Mordechai Hatzadik and the Jewish boy. So here, this boy was walking, and Rabbi Yochanan asked him, "So tell me something. What did you learn today?" So the boy answers, "We learned aser b'shvil to asher. Aser to asrenu." Now, these words together literally mean, it's from the Torah, not our week's Torah portion. It says, Aser to asrenu. You will surely give a tenth of your field. Now, in Hebrew, the words shin and sin are written exactly the same way, right? Like the Russian she. By the way, Cyrillic, that's where they got it from. Right? Kirill took the letter shin and they turned into the Russian she. It's shaped the same way. Only in Hebrew, it's not flat at the bottom. It's a little bit more at an angle. So when Rabbi Yochanan asked him, that's interesting, but what's the connection? Because you're pronouncing it differently. Aser to asrenu, asher to asher, you'll for sure give a 10. And here he's saying asher, b'shvil to asher. Give a tenth in order that you should become wealthy. So the boy says, from here we learn that if a person gives a tenth, you'll become wealthy. So he asked him, wait a minute, but don't we know that person is not supposed to do mitzvahs for the purpose of testing God? You're not supposed to, right? You don't say, oh, I don't know, fasting on Yom Kippur or whatever the case be. You know, I said, oh, maybe I'll make it. Maybe you'll make it. Maybe you won't make it. And if you die, it'll be a sin. You're not meant to test God. So what makes you think that you can test God with this, right? So he says, no, talking with this. God said, with this you can test me. And the Evrey says, Taka. It says that you see in the Gemara, it says, I will pour blessing on you ad blidai, without limit. In other words, that this specific mitzvah, because it's so counterintuitive, you would assume the more I hold on to my possessions, that's logical. I give when I'm up to it. I give because I'm, in a good frame of mind. Comes along this mitzvah, he says, no, You got it all wrong. Precisely at the point that it seems to be illogical, and you move ahead and you do it. And in this specific mitzvah, other mitzvahs, not so much. In this mitzvah, on the contrary, God says, no, you go, test me, and you'll see that you will be blessed many, many, many times over. So while again, this idea is not mentioned in specific in that Torah portion, but the end of this episode of giving, the giving, the pekadon, or giving the money that was meant for the person, and giving it to the Beis Hamikdash, concludes with the words: the person does give the priest what is due to him, will be rewarded by being wealthy. Right? And he will require, in other words, so that's the end of and ultimately the priest officiates, in other words, if the person, but if someone retains the priest, that which is all due to the priest, that he and his wife will eventually require him, they'll need the priest, in other words, officiate the ritual of the suspected wife. So that's how those things are all into. And also, maybe if we can take a step back somewhat, and if you remember, one of the questions that I asked in the beginning is that it seems the whole trajectory, the whole order of this parsha is a little bit disconnected, right? It seems to jump. It goes from, who's carrying what, and then, Gershon and Merari, then counting how many members of the families there were, then it goes into about impurity, then it goes about theft, then it goes about the unloyal, unfaithful wife. So you can say, yeah, the Torah is like that. It just throws stuff at you. But obviously we know that, we're meant to try to connect things together. And the connection here is because, like mentioned before, this is when the Jews moved into the desert. This is when they finally began the mission with which God entrusted them of moving and applying the lessons of the Torah, lessons of converting or transforming this world into a godly place, into action, into practice. And along the way of a Jew applying these lessons, many things can come up. And therefore the Torah tells us, first of all, you have to remember, you have to maintain your purity. What is purity? What is Kedusha? The word Kedusha means in Hebrew two things: holy and separated. Holy means removed, elevated, to be above, as it were, closer to God, a little bit further away from the earth. And separated. Separated means there are clear and very clear lines and distinctions between what I can and what I can't do, who I am and who I'm not. Interesting enough, that the Gershon, who was the first to be carrying things mentioned in the Torah, what did he carry? He carried the curtains. The Torah begins not with mentioning the special vessels carried by Kehat, but rather the curtains. Why? Because for a Jew in this world, you need to have curtains. You need to have boundaries. You need to have, within your own mind, understanding where your boundaries end and when the boundaries of the outside world, as it were, begin. They're not kind of fluid. You understand, dear? Hold on a second. I'm going to ask. It's really hot. I'm on the third floor, and I want to ask. I think somebody just closed the door. Hold on a second. Oh man, I don't know if you can tell. I'm looking red now, or I'm feeling red. I'm very sweaty. So I just, on this idea of sort of having borders and separations and divisions, is a story with a previous Rebbe, the Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, when he was a small child, and his father, the Rabbi Shalom Dover, would instruct him, not to teach him Aleph Beis. He taught him what it means, really, sort of the priorities in life. So he was teaching him, and he said, "Tell me." I don't know how he called him, Yosef or Yosef Yitzchak or Yosef. He says, "What's the difference between the letter Shin and the letter Sin?" Discussed before. Asher Ta'as, Shin, Sin. She said that the Shin has a pintel, it has a dot on the right side, And the sin has a pintala dot on the left side. Right? Seems simple enough. He said, oh, right. The pintala on the right means when looking at another Jew, not just physically, but looking with your mind's eye, you look with the right eye, with the right pintala. When looking at a candy, you look with the sin, with the left pintala. In other words, you should know those things that deserve your right eye and those things which deserve your left eye. That which has to do with doing a favor for another Jew, another person, those things that are positive, that should take your right, that should be your focus, your right side, your right eye. Those things that are just pursuit of pleasure and just kind of just the extra stuff, that's the left side. Understand they kind of don't overlap. They're different things. Okay? So therefore, following this idea you see reflected in every aspect of this week's Torah portion. The idea of the unfaithful wife is also an allegory for the relationship between God and the Jewish people. Between God and the Jewish people. And one of the first things that we're told, the first lessons that we learn is, it says, when a woman goes astray. So there's a famous and a very interesting teaching of Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, the second Rabbi of Chabad. And he said the idea kisishta, right, means that she will go astray. Sishta is also very similarly connected to the word of shtut, or shtus, if you want Ashkenazi pronunciation. What is the idea of shtus? The idea of foolishness. Why the idea of foolishness? Our sages answered the question. The person, regardless of gender, does not sin other than foolishness overtakes him. Now, what kind of foolishness? I wanted to do this. I knew what I'm doing. It seemed like a good idea at the time. I had a good time doing it. Everything worked out. What kind of foolishness? Where's the foolishness? So sometimes you could say that was a foolishness. Why would every sin be connected with the idea of foolishness? The truth is found in Chassidut, this idea, the very beautiful idea, is that fundamentally and inherently a Jew wants to do the right thing. So we are. What is the right thing? The right thing is what God wants us to do. That's how we're wired. That's how we're born. We want to do what He wants us to do. If that was the case, why don't we always do the right thing? Why does sometimes we do the wrong thing? And the answer, our sages say, because of a feeling of foolishness. Now, the feeling of foolishness is not exactly like pleading the insanity defense in a crime. I don't know what I was thinking. I was crazy. That was a bank that I robbed. I thought I was buying ice cream. Who would have thought? I don't know. I came in looking for ice cream. I leave with a bag of money. Look at this. Foolishness means it plays with your brain. Foolishness means that in my mind, I'm doing something that seems to be like a reasonable thing, even though it's completely unreasonable. Our sages offer an example. If you give somebody money and he loses whatever you give him, it's a fool. Because he has no value. He doesn't value things. This, that, it's all the same to him. Most people inherently have a sense of value for things. We're not speaking about being materialistic, right? But you know, we form attachments to objects, we kind of value something. Okay, look, people lose money either because it falls out or because they invest in their own thing. No, but a person loses everything is a fool. A person that sleeps in a cemetery is also a fool. And a person that goes on the road by himself is also a fool. Why? Because he's assuming everybody who's afraid to go out into the street, they're hypochondriacs. What is it to be afraid of? Okay, bubble. If it's at 10 o'clock at night and you're living in the middle of nowhere, stay home. Stay home. Where are you going? What do you have to wait? What did you lose outside? Because in his mind, he's assuming that which is reality is not really reality. It's coming back to our topic. What is foolishness? Foolishness is a person convincing himself, doing something that he knows is wrong, convincing himself that it's right. Because had he had a clear, sight, a moment of clarity, he would have realized that this is probably not the right thing to be doing. But it left him. So feeling of foolishness is not, or spirit of foolishness is not some kind of a demonic possession. You walk out and boom, some clove demon snaps into you, and I don't know what overcame you. You know what overcame you? Of course you know what overcame you. It was you. It wasn't somebody else. Just put in before we move on. There's a Hasidic Rebbe that said people use this expression that they start praying and all of these foreign thoughts enter the mind. He said, what do you mean foreign thoughts? They're your thoughts. They didn't come from the moon. Nobody just zapped you. Nobody kind of hypnotized you into thinking about you on your own, got distracted, and you're thinking about something else. So you have the choice of what to think about. You decided not to focus on this, and you open up your mind to whatever else came. So the point there being is that when they speak about a feeling or a spirit, it's lying to ourselves, or a person lying to himself. So she lied to herself. And the expression that's used is that despite whatever she did, adayin b'yahudata, she's still in her Jewishness. Which means God loves me. So I'm not the perfect Jew, but I'm okay. It's just true. In that whatever Jew does, God loves him. But in this regard, what led her to go down this path? Is, okay, what could be wrong? I know this guy, me and Vasya, we grew up together. Come on. Seriously, we're not adults. Adults can't. An adult man and woman can't control themselves. Yeah, it's a big deal. So we'll go for a walk. We'll talk about the good old times. Whatever it was, we'll go. That's it. We'll have a drink. We'll have a drink of wine. Wine. Again, we're adults. Nothing could possibly go wrong. Could possibly go wrong. And the fact is, going progressively one step to another, wind up in this situation. Or even if she's innocent, this could have been prevented. It didn't have to happen. It didn't have to happen. All these circumstances that came together, it happened because she did not, she did not exercise her self judgment and restraint to know when to stop. Now would be a good time. Now would be a good time to stop. Yeah. Okay. So that is the story here. But ultimately, we're said that just to the final point again, without going through all the different things here, is that the Rebbe said that this example that she's accused and so on and so forth, but ultimately paralleling the relation with God and the Jewish people, is that regardless of what, regardless of how bad it might seem from the outside, a Jew and God are always connected. Even if it seems like a sister Ishte, when it comes to the source, when it comes to what a person really is that it is a Jew is always connected to his essence. Okay, so far so good. Everybody with me?
Mm-hmm.
It's quiet here. I'm hearing crickets, even though there's no crickets in Regal Park. There's no cars even. We're in the middle of a curfew outside. So I'm glad, by the way, you all made it past curfew on Zoom. You're all here. You weren't afraid to wander outside into cyberspace unaccompanied, and here we all are. Okay. Okay. Fine. So let me kind of breeze through, because again, it's a huge part. So we did a little bit of it. The idea of a nazir is also an interesting idea, in that the idea of a nazir has sort of two contradictory ideas. It's a positive and at the same time as a negative. It's a positive in that what motivates this person to be a nazir is it's coming from a good place. It's coming from a good place. The story in the Talmud of one of the sages who so praised one of the Nazirim, even though he let his, because this nazir was a young man, very attractive, he let his hair grow, he was very proud of his hair, and he looked into the mirror, and he said, "Oh, not bad. I'm a nice looking guy." And as soon as the thought entered his mind, he realized that this is not going to end well. Not going to end well. because he's young, big, strong, beautiful, with long hair, putting himself, as it were, out into society, the possibility of him succumbing to something he shouldn't be doing is pretty high. And he said, fine, I know, I see where this is going. I'm going to make a vow. I'm going to let my hair grow and then I'm going to cut it off and that's it. I don't need this. I don't need to be tempting fate. And one of the sages said that this is really the highest level of Nazirut, that he really achieved a very high level. But at the same time, Rashi says that once the Nazir finishes his Nazirut, he has to bring a sin offering. And the reason why he has to bring a sin offering is because our sages say God created wine, and wine can be used for good. We use wine for Kiddush, we use wine for Havdalah, we use wine for Pesach, we use Purim. The mitzvah is done with wine. And here he said, I'm not going to drink wine. So you can say, fine. Of course, he said he's not going to drink wine. When you drink alcohol, actually wine, not alcohol, because he wants to avoid sinning. He wants to avoid temptation. And I say, just say that's commendable. That's fine. But with that said, he's also denying and cutting off the fact that God created wine for a purpose. And if it's permitted and it's something that can be used, it should be utilized for the good. So you have this dichotomy within the relationship of God to the Jewish people. You could say even about Shuvah. It says about Shuvah. We say about Shuvah, we're not necessarily saying about Shuvah, not necessarily about Shuvah who grew up not religious, and then, I don't know, went to Chabad or went to Eish, and then here we all are. Okay, that's one term. Another term about Shuvah is somebody who begins his path in serving God. It doesn't matter what he was on before. So within the avoda, within the process of a person becoming a Baal Shuvah, okay, regardless of what stage, there's two processes, two steps. The first one is to realize how he got to where he got in the first place, which is, like I mentioned before, in the beginning of the Parsha, having very clear borders. This is good, this is not good. This is appropriate, this is going to cause me to do bad things. I'm not going to have to deal with this. I'm just going to separate myself from this, which is appropriate. Because past this point, you can't do anything. Remember the example of the house. You can't build a house in a swamp. No matter how beautiful it is, if the foundation is rotten, you build and build and build and build, it's going to collapse. So you got to clear it out. And then once you clear it out, you got to build. You got to build. You got to go higher. In other words, within the... Okay, I'm hearing feedback. Within the relationship of Jew to God, you need both steps. One, knowing that it's very important to have feedback. Whose feedback am I on? Okay. To have, to step back, but at the same time to recognize, wait a minute, but I can't always be thinking of myself as somebody who's incapable of moving forward. So if something causes me to fall into, again, depending things are, it's, I don't want to, I'm generalizing because obviously the specifics, if a person has a dependency on certain things, then that thing is no longer, it's done. And now and forever, we're not speaking like that. We're not speaking about those things. Speaking about the ability of looking at the physical material world, not just as something that can necessarily and will lead us to a downfall, but something that, we can tap into it. I mean, we can feel comfortable with recognizing that this is something God created. And if it's something that's kosher and proper and fitting, I can use it within a proper context and use it to elevate itself and elevate me. It's not either or. It doesn't necessarily have to be a constant struggle. Now, within the last 5 minutes, I don't want, again, I said the end of the Parsha is fascinating of itself, but there's no way we can go through each one of the 12 tribes explaining specifically, but I just want to stop for 1 second on the blessing of the Kohanim Yivrech Hashem Yishmerecha. As an important aside, an important point, the Rebbe often stressed that the priestly blessing is something everybody can do. What do I mean? So while for sure on the holidays, the Kohen getting up and blessing the Jewish people is something only a Kohen can do. But there's an expression, interesting expression from the Rambam. The Rambam says not only the Bnei Levi, the sons of Levi, were designated to serve God, but every single Jew devotes himself to the service of God. Now, what he's saying is not that it's interchangeable. That the Chabad Riga Park, on Shabbos morning we have 10 Israelim. I can say, oh, Ishai, this week you're a Kohen. He's not a Kohen, unless his father was a Kohen. So he could be Israel. But he's speaking specifically at the Leviim. Their task was, and the Kohanim, they were completely and totally devoted to God. They had no other responsibility. They didn't own property. They did not own fields. They did not do anything. What did they do? They served God. Kohen, even more so. Right? That was the whole purpose. The Rambam says an amazing thing. The ability of being a Kohen with a small c, that everybody can do. The idea, oh, I'm going to devote it, dedicate myself to God. We're not speaking, I'm saying quitting the job and living whatever, going off to Kolel for the rest of your life. That's not what I mean. But just here, what defines who I am? What's my purpose? What's my being? I'm a servant of God. This is what I do. Eved Hashem, I'm a servant of God. This is what I do in my own capacity. So in that regard, therefore, the ability of blessing others also applies. Furthermore, God told Abraham, all of your children will be for a blessing, which means they can bless others. We have this ability from Abraham, who gave it to Yitzchak, who gave it to Yaakov. So inherently, every Jew, when you wish somebody, again, not wish, when you bless, wishing and blessing is not quite the same thing. Blessing means that there's a spiritual power within me that I can draw down and bring and give it to you. It's not a wish. It's not like a pleasant thing to say. It's a real thing. I can transmit and channel from above, from me straight into you. Now, if that was the case, Taka, you would assume that every time somebody blessed somebody to win a lottery, that would work. No, maybe he won the lottery or she won the lottery, but not quite the way the people imagine. And here I'm going to, again, with a couple of minutes left, I want to explain what does Birkat Kohen mean, and why does it need to be a times of Beis HaMikdash said every single day. And the idea there being is that the blessing for Parnas and all of the other things that we need are given on Rosh Hashanah. It says that all of the money that a person is meant to earn throughout a year are granted on Rosh Hashanah, except the money used for a mitzvah, the money used for celebration of Shabbos, and the money given to tzedakah. So if a person is given, allocated, I don't know, X amount, $50,000 for the year. I say, oh, I need $50,000 a year. I need $4,000 a month to live. So I'm going to give $100 of tzedakah, or $500 for the year, and I'm done. And then he says, no, good cause, and it's I'm going to get $5,000. $5,000. Given 10% of your income, you're going to decrease your ability. You won't be able to live month to month. So on Rosh Hashanah, that the 50,000 and the 5, that's a separate cheshbon. That's a separate. The Jews have two. We're very good at creative accounting. So God keeps creative accounting. That what you need to live is this. That what you need to spend other things. That's a second cheshbon. On the contrary, that 5,000 will impact the 50 should grow back by another 50. Anyway, we spoke about this already. So the question is, if that is the case, the person, why do we have to pray 3 times a day? If I already know how much I'm going to have, so what do I have to keep on asking? Seems rude. No. In Rosh Hashanah, it's designated. But you don't know where, you don't know what capacity. In other words, in Shemayim, up there somewhere in the heavens, they say, oh, she needs $50,000. She needs 50,000 smiles. She needs 50,000 good jokes to make her happy. She needs 50,000 good days to celebrate. 50,000? In other words, it could remain in the potential and the spiritual. So we pray to God, no. That's 50. I need it, please, either 20s or 50s. Smiles are good. I like smiles. Let's keep it like coming down further into a way that we can appreciate. One level, Shachar Daven. Okay, good. So far, so good. A little bit lower. Mincha. Okay, good. I might. Let's keep on moving it down again. So, in other words, to bring that blessing down from the higher realm to the lower realm, it needs to be going further. It needs to be we need to be asking and requesting and bringing it further down in order that be able to also, it should enter the physical material world. Not remain in the abstract, not remain just in the spiritual, which is good. It's fine, but we need to be able to live. And having just 50 days, 50,000 days of smiles is nice. It's not going to pay my bills. It's not going to be able to give me the ability to give in stock or put my kids through yeshiva, being able to make a nice farbrengen or anything else. I need to have it in, as we say in Hebrew, muzuman. I need to have it in cash, nalichke. Birkas Kohanim is precisely that, but much faster. Why? Because the Kohanim were told they are mazrizim. They are enthusiastic. They're able to make things happen fast. One of the uniqueness of Aaron HaKohen is because he is associated with love, and God loves love. Love is good. Love makes things happen. Love and peace bring blessing into the world. Aaron, representative of love, representative of peace, his kids were given this genetic ability of being conduits for God's blessing fast, like the easy pass lane, a direct deposit. They're able to influence and bring down this blessing in a way. Give you chen. Chen is grace. Grace means of not only do I have to give you, I want to give you. It's good. You make me feel good, therefore I want to give you more. And that is in the priestly blessing. So what do we see from Birkat Kohanim? That the three prong Yivarecha Hashem Vishmerecha. Yivarecha is drawing down. Vishmerecha means the blessing should be preserved. You should get it as it was dedicated, and it shouldn't also fall through your fingers. Yoyer Hashem Padam shine His face on you, face Pnim, the innermost essence. God should look at you and be happy with you and smile at you, and give you grace. He should turn his face to you, grant you peace. Why our sages say, is this the last word of the blessing? Because our sages say that God did not find in this world any greater receptacle for blessing than peace. When there's a wholeness, when there's a peace, then it's able to draw down blessing to the house. We say Shalom Bayis, when you have a complete home. Shalom Bayis means how does God's presence dwell in a home when there's a peaceful home? And God forbid, if there's no peace in the home, so there's not only no peace, there's no godliness, there's no blessing, there's nothing. There's nothing. So the ultimate absolute blessing for to succeed in every regard is to have peace between within yourself, peace within the home, and peace with those that are close to us. So I'm going to conclude this week's Torah portion here, the class here. I hope everybody enjoyed. Let me know. I'm going to turn off the recording.